Egungun, guide my way. Egungun, guide my way. Egungun, guide my way. Spirits of my ancestors light my way. Well, if you don't believe that they stand with me, Egungun, guide my way. Oh, place on the altar, food and drink. Egungun, guide my way. Ancestors must speak in your dreams. Egungun, guide my way. Peace, peace, Black people. Welcome to Jemima's World. We are our ancestors, the Jelly Mooses Cafe. I am your hostess, Jemima, and it's always good to be Black in the land of the living once again. It has been a minute. It's been a minute that I've done a Sunday episode, that I've done any episodes. February was an extremely busy month for me, lucrative but very busy. I got to do quite a few presentations of the ancestors. I got to work with some kids. Um, so it was a very busy month, but again, very lucrative and very gratifying and humbling, to say the least. A lot happened while I was gone. They basically lynched the president of Ukraine on live TV, the same way they did George Floyd. They have fired thousands and thousands of federal workers, of military workers. They are slowly but surely removing Black people's existence throughout history. And they are doing it at a rapid, rapid pace. Now, what I want you to understand before I get into today's episode is the war between Ukraine and the United States. Now, I felt sorry for President Zelensky. As my mama used to say, I felt right sorry for him. But I did not forget that when the war first began in Ukraine, between Ukraine and Russia, that they treated the Africans in Ukraine like dirt on the bottom of their shoe. So this is not our fight. This is not our fight. Stay out of it. And from what I understand, there is a brother who has a YouTube channel. He is Nigerian, I believe, and I cannot remember his name. Um, Zach uh, Makwasa, I think, and I'm probably butchering his last name. But he has a African channel and an English channel. And after the debacle in the Oval Office, on his English channel, I'm sure on his African channel as well, he talked about how when the war began, that quite a few African countries offered assistance to Ukraine, and they were met with resistance that those African people weren't smart enough. They weren't intelligent enough to help out Ukraine, and so they declined their help, even though they had basically again treated Africans in Ukraine like dirt on the bottom of their shoes. African nations still offered to help and was met with resistance. And now, what I understand is that President Zelensky is basically begging Africa for help, and I think the African countries are pretty much saying, "Yeah, we don't do that here." So don't be fooled, or I've seen a lot of African Americans replacing their Facebook page profile picture with the Ukraine flag and saying, "I stand with Ukraine." Good for you. I stand with Africa because Africa is standing with us. All right, so let's get into today's episode. Wisdom of the ancestors. At the beginning, you heard a song called Egungun Guide My Way. It is by Ashe Soul. If you have not listened to their music, please go to their YouTube channel, Ashe, ASHE Soul, Afro Spiritual Music. Egungun Guide My Way, Wisdom of the Ancestors. It's the same thing, it's just said differently. So, we're going to get into how we need to, at this moment in time, tap into the wisdom of our ancestors to get through this. because we got some stuff. We got work to do. We got work to do. I've noticed on social media, on Facebook, a lot of Black Christians are just basically just throwing out scripture. You know, anytime anything go wrong, they throw out scripture, and they always throw out the same scripture, the only scripture that they know. They throw out that scripture, and basically, when they throw out that scripture, it's the same thing when a school shooting happens and politicians will come out and say, our thoughts and prayers are with you and with the families. And a lot of people condemn them for saying, you know, thoughts and prayers. Thoughts and prayers, they say, are not going to save our children. And scripture are simply thoughts and prayers. In case you didn't know, scripture are just thoughts put to paper by whoever wrote them. So when things like this that we are going through right now, if all you can offer is scripture, you are basically simply offering thoughts and prayers. So we're going to talk about how we tap into the wisdom of our ancestors to get our liberation, to get our freedom. The picture that you see on the front of this episode on the left is a depiction of Queen Mother Nanny of the Maroons, who was born in the 17th century. She was a leader of the Maroons. She was from Ghana. She was of the Ashanti nation. And she led people from enslavement to freedom. She fought off Tuba. On the right, you see Queen Mother Harriet Tubman, also from the Ashanti nation, from Ghana. Then it was called the Gold Coast. Now it's called Ghana, who also led her people to freedom. They didn't use any scripture. They prayed a lot to the Creator, but then they walked in those prayers. Their prayers were not to uh, take things away. Their prayers were not to remove anything. Their prayers were, tell me how to navigate through this, how to overcome this. So they had more than thoughts and prayers. Now, I'm talking about this because when we tap into our ancestors' wisdom, we are not only tapping into that specific ancestor, but we're tapping into their ancestors' wisdom. So Harriet Tubman came to this country or this land by way of her grandmother, Modesty, who was from the Gold Coast and who was an Ashanti woman. So Harriet was only once generation removed from Africa. Now we know that we learn from our parents, and our parents learn from their parents, and so on and so forth. So by the time you get to us, by the time you get to yourself, the wisdom that you're learning is ancient wisdom that is just keep being passed down from generation to generation to generation. And what we try to do is we try to make Queen Mother Harriet Tubman uh, an African American. She's always been an African because of her culture. Again, she's only one generation removed from Africa. So, because we sit, those of us who have been blessed and lucky enough to have been able to sit in the presence of our grandparents and glean from them, I tend to believe that even though it's not in any of the writings about Queen Mother Harriet Tubman, because again, anything written about her mostly is written by white people. So I'm willing to bet that she was able to sit at her grandmother Modesty's feet, or at least be around her enough to know about her African upbringing. And even if she had not been able to physically sit at her grandmother's feet, her mother is the daughter of her grandmother. And so through her mother, she would have learned about her grandmother. How do you know, Yemima? I know because that was me. My grandmother on my mother's side passed away a year before I was born. I never got a chance to physically meet her. I would have loved to, but I know my grandmother. I know who she was. I know what she was. I know how good she was at raising her children. I know because my mother talked about her often. She would say, my mother was as good as gold. And now, in my older days and in my wisdom, and I can look back and think about the fact that my grandmother had 11 children, 8 girls and 3 boys. Actually, she had 12 children. She had 8 girls and 4 boys. 8 girls and 4 boys. So I know my grandmother's uh, culture. I know what she did because my mother replicated it. And so I saw my grandmother in my mother. And so Harriet Tubman saw her grandmother, Modesty, and her mother, Harriet O. Ritt. Now, the Ashanti Nation is a West African culture, a West African nation of Ghana. They have a unique cultural heritage. They have different views on how to worship the Creator. The Creator has different names than what was here. And I'm willing to bet you $1 to a donut that Harriet's mother, Old Rit, knew the names of the deities from the Gold Coast. The names when she got here or as she was growing up were different from what her mother may have told her in the quarters. Asasaya, the earth goddess, one of the principal deities worshipped by the Ashanti people, responsible for the fertility of the land and the well being of the people, portrayed as a strong, nurturing figure, intimate connection to the earth and all its creatures, venerated by farmers and is invoked during planting and harvesting season. Now, Harriet, being enslaved, definitely was working in farming. And so instead of relying on the white people's knowledge of farming, which they had none, which is why they had to enslave our ancestors, Harriet's mother, Old Rit, would have drawn on the wisdom of her mother, Modesty, when it comes to planting and growing herbs and things of that nature. Wisdom of the ancestors. And Yahweh was the supreme God and the creator of the universe, believed to be omnipotent, omniscient, and omnipresent, governing all aspects of life as the father of all gods and humans. And Yahweh represents the unity and the interconnectedness of all living things. The symbol is the golden stool, and it's a golden stool, and it's an emblem of the Ashanti people's unity and strength. So you have the earth goddess, Asasaya, and you have Nyame, the father. So you see that they have a dual God, meaning it has feminine and male aspects. Their mythology or their mythical figures was or is Anansi the spider, who happens to be a trickster. I do Anansi programming for little kids all the time. They had unique beliefs. They believed that the soul had a spiritual essence. They believed that each person possessed a unique essence, which influences their character and their destiny. And not only do our unique essence influence our character and destiny, our ancestors also influence it because we carry their DNA inside of us. They possess the Ghana people, the Ashanti people of Ghana possess rich and diverse cultural heritage, um, including rituals. Their mythological figures serve as spiritual guides and symbolize important values such as wisdom, unity, and resourcefulness. Remember that word because it's going to come back into play when it comes to Queen Mother Harriet. The beliefs and stories have been passed down from generation to generation, serving as a vital link between the past and the present and helping to shape the collective identity of the Ashanti people. The Ashanti people place great value on the preservation of their culture, their heritage, through oral traditions such as proverbs, folk tales, historical accounts. These narratives not only serve as a means of entertainment, but also as a vehicle for transmitting cultural knowledge and wisdom. By maintaining these oral traditions, the Ashanti people ensure that their unique cultural identity and way of life will continue to thrive for generations to come. So when Queen Mother Harriet Tubman was growing up, even the people on the plantation would look at her and say, she looks like one of those Ashanti women. The way that she carried herself was of the Ashanti people. She internalized a lot of things that she learned from her mother because we could not speak about it openly in front of white people. We were meant to forget everything about Africa, everything that we had learned, everything that was in our soul, our spirit, our essence. We were basically made to forget everything. But in those quarters, when the two Bob was not around, when the enslaver or the oppressor, the Sun Dodgers were not around, they were telling stories about Africa so that it would never be forgotten. They would hide things within their quarters so that the enslaver would not know that they were still worshiping the God that they chose in Africa, so that they would know that they were still not talking about different deities or different ways of worshiping. So in Maryland, they did some excavations um, in the area where Queen Mother Harriet Tubman was born and raised until she self emancipated. And they found some things underneath the quarters where her father, Ben Ross, uh, lived. And these are some of the items that they found in their quarters underneath. And it looks like just glass. And if you look up there to the upper left hand corner, it if you look at it, if you just look at it from here or from just the picture, it actually looks like it could be a crystal. But more than likely it's a rock. But crystals are rocks. And so because they were no longer in Africa where crystals were probably plentiful, they used what they could. They could sand those rocks down to make them shine like crystals. You have pottery, you have different things that they found. And they found these things beneath um, the old fireplace of Ben Ross. And according to what they found, the archaeologists are saying that these things represented West African religion. It represented what we now call, or what even then they called hoodoo. Uh, they found it again on the Thompson plantation where Ben Ross was enslaved. That's Harriet Tubman's father, and it talks about that the things were hidden in the fireplace or underneath the fireplace, and that a lot of times they would hide these articles or hide these things around their quarters to keep different haints away, to keep different bad spirits away, um, you know, to use as divination and things of that nature. So even then, Harriet's father Ben, he was also tapping into the wisdom of his ancestors. Now, I don't have any information regarding if he was second generation African. I'm sure he probably was. So his parents probably came from Africa, or at least his mother probably came from was brought him from Africa. All of them came from Africa. But what I'm saying is that he probably had information and stories told to him by his mother or father who was brought from Africa. How many of y'all remember the movie Roots? In the entire movie, and we missed it. We missed it. We watched it and we've watched it over and over again. But I think we missed the ultimate thing that they were trying to tell us in Roots was don't forget where you came from. Because mostly in the entire movie, Kuta Kinte was not going to forget his home, Africa. And he passed all of that information down to Kizzy, passed it down to Chicken George, who passed it down to his son Tom, who passed it down to his daughter, and I can't remember her name, until eventually it got to Alex Haley, who remembered the wisdom of his ancestors. Harriet tapped into the wisdom of Nanny of the Maroons, who was her ancestor, and learned how to liberate her people. She tapped into the wisdom of her ancestors and learned how to use herbs, roots, tree barks to make medicine for her people. She learned how to read nature, the stars, the uh, the signs of the season, the moon. Certainly, we shouldn't think, or you don't think that it was the white man who taught us how to read these things in order to liberate us. The white people will never give you the tools for freedom. That's something you are going to have to learn on your own. They will never give those that they enslave or oppress the tools on how to get free. So that is why you cannot rely on just the Bible for your liberation. You are going to have to rely on the wisdom of your ancestors. Queen Mother Harriet Tubman taught us a lot of things. Um, we just have to tap into that energy. We are going to have to be resourceful. Remember, I talked about the word resourceful earlier. So we're going to have to learn to be resourceful using the resources that we have now. There's a point in Queen Mother Harriet's life when she was during the Civil War and she had become a spy for the Union Army. She had become a nurse for the Union Army. She had become a scout for the Union Army. She worked with the military. But one thing she said about that, she said, I don't trust the government with my people. She said, I don't trust the government with my people. And we shouldn't either. And it is now coming to fruition why we shouldn't never trust the government with our people. When Harriet got free, she helped to found a church, an AME church in upstate New York. She also opened up a home for the aged. She understood that when people were getting their freedom after the Civil War, a lot of elderly, enslaved people didn't have family. And so she opened up a home for the aged. We don't have that for our people. Now, I understand, we want to keep our people at home as long as possible and not even put them into a facility. And we don't have to necessarily put them in a facility, but we could have community centers for our seniors. It could almost be like a community daycare where they can go during the day to be with other seniors. But Harriet Tubman opened that up for us. And the way things are going now, they're getting ready to take Social Security from our seniors. And that's not going to affect the rich white people. It is going to affect the working class Black people and the working poor Black people. And so we're going to need to tap into the wisdom of our ancestors to figure out how they did that. Because when they were freed from enslavement, the government had nothing for them. They could not go to the government for anything. Any type of organization that they put together to help those that were enslaved, it only lasted for a couple of years. Um, the Freedmen's Bureau was put in place to help those that were newly freed. It only lasted a few years. The NAACP is still around, but it doesn't do a whole lot. Social organizations were put in place by a lot of churches. They're no longer there. We're going to have to bring those things back and tap into the wisdom of our ancestors and go back to the way that they used to do things in order that we can depend on each other because we have no allies. Dr. John Henry Clark says we have no friends, and we don't. We are going to have to learn to depend on each other and tap into the wisdom of our ancestors and do things the way that they need to be done so that the next generation do not find themselves enslaved again. We tap into the wisdom of Queen Mother Harriet Tubman, who tapped into the wisdom of Queen Nanny of the Maroons, who tapped into the wisdom, more I'm sure, of her ancestors, who tapped into the wisdom of hers. That ancient wisdom of the ancestors is where we need to be. It's where we need to be. And I want to talk about Queen Mother Harriet Tubman today because tomorrow is the anniversary of her passing, of her joining the ancestors. Uh, she transitioned to join the ancestors in 1913 on March 10th. And I just want to read, I want to end it with um, some Ashanti proverbs. These are quotes from Queen Mother Harriet Tubman, who was an Ashanti woman. She was a African. She was an American-born African of the Ashanti Nation. And some of the quotes I just want to read. When she got free, she said, "I looked at my hands to see if I was the same person. There was such a glory over everything. The sun came up like gold through the trees, and I felt like I was in heaven, like gold through the trees, like gold through the trees." Knowing that she comes from the Gold Coast of Africa. She says, "I heard Uncle Tom's Cabin, I heard it read. And I tell you, Miss Stowe's pen hasn't begun to paint what slavery is as I have seen it in the far South. I've seen the real thing, and I don't want to see it on no stage or in no theater." One of her other quotes was, "I lay sick on my bed from Christmas to March. Mm. I was always praying for poor old master. Feels like I didn't know nothing else to do but pray for old master. Oh Lord, convert old master. Oh dear Lord, change that man's heart and make him a Christian." Now the quote stops there, but then she goes on to say, "But Lord, if you can't change him, then kill him and take him out the way." She said I had two sisters carried away in a chain gang. One of them left two children. We were always uneasy, meaning she always thought that she too might be carried away. Most of those that were coming from the mainland were destitute, almost naked, and I'm trying to find places for those able to work and provide for them as best I can, so as to lighten the burden on the government as much as possible, while at the same time they learn to respect themselves by earning their own living. She said, I would fight for my liberty so long as my strength lasted, and if the time came for me to go, the Lord would let him take me. She said she thought slavery was the next thing to hell. And if a person could send another into bondage, he would, it appears to me, be bad enough to send him to hell if he could. She said in my dreams and visions I seemed to see a line, and on the other side of that line were green fields and lovely flowers and beautiful white ladies who stretched out their arms to me over the line, but I couldn't reach them no how. I always fell before I got to the line. Now that is a quote that was written in a book by Sarah Bradford. And I really don't believe that it was white women that Harriet Tubman saw, because not one uh, there were few white women who helped her. I believe that she saw women in white. And lastly, she said I was the conductor of the Underground Railroad for 8 years, and I can say what most conductors can't say. I never ran my train off the track, and I never lost a passenger. Now, these were quotes they say were by Harriet. I don't know if they were or not. Again, most of the stories written about her were written by white people. But I do know that we can go in and look at the Ashanti Nation and look at what they believed, look at their culture, and understand that their culture was passed down to Harriet. So when we look at Harriet Tubman, we look at an Ashanti woman who embodied another Ashanti woman named Nanny, Queen Nanny of the Maroons. So look at your bloodline and find someone in your family that you can tap into their wisdom and make it through. Because y'all, we got some dark days ahead, and we need the wisdom of the ancestors to get us through. All right, that is it. Still a little tired, but I got this one done. So we salute you, Mojuba, Queen Mother Harriet Tubman, Mojuba, Queen Nanny of the Maroon, the wisdom of the ancestors. Until next time, you know the drill. Love yourself, love each other, give yourself some grace, give each other some grace. Honor your ancestors, they will honor you. We are our ancestors. Peace.